13 years. It has been 13 years since the game once known as Final Fantasy Versus 13 was announced. I was only a 14-year-old kid, watching all the new trailers that had been announced at E3 2006. Under a brand new lore known as Fabula Nova Crystallis, the next mainline Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy 13, was announced alongside of it. And while that game certainly looked interesting, I couldn't help but be entranced by a trailer we got for another Final Fantasy game, Final Fantasy Versus 13. Even though it was only a short teaser, what we were shown was completely different from anything we've ever seen from the franchise. A pale character with blue hair, whose eyes turned red when he summoned a flurry of swords and deflected a myriad of bullets, using them as both his weapon and his shield. At the time of the game's announcement, this mysterious character did not even have a name. Since he was the main character of a Final Fantasy, we called him names like Rain or Storm and void of a true name. It wasn't until a full 2 years later that character designer and director of the project, Tetsuya Nomura, would give him an official name, Noctis Lucis Caelum, Light of the Night Sky when loosely translated from Latin. Though after this, it'd be long periods of times where we wouldn't hear anything about the game. We would get a super interesting trailer here and there, but then we'd go back to hearing nothing again. I am now 27 years old. From the start of this journey in 2006 to the release of the Dawn of the Future novel in 2019 that gave the official grand finale for the continuity of Final Fantasy 15, this game has been with me and has been an ongoing ordeal in some way for almost half of my life now. In some way, shape, or form, it feels like I've always been waiting on something from this universe. From the announcement of Versus to its rebrand and reboot as Final Fantasy 15, going to watch Kingsglaive at the theater, which happened to be playing in my city, buying the Ultimate Collector's Edition of the game, getting the DLC, waiting for Dawn of the Future, getting disappointed that it got cancelled, and of course being forced to settle for a novel instead. And even when I wasn't anticipating something tangible from the game itself, I was participating in the community, even cosplaying Noctis 2 years before the game was even released, and of course cosplaying him some more after. Even my channel's namesake, the Night Sky Prince, is directly derived from Noctis Caelum, meaning night sky, and the fact that, well, he's a prince. So much about the history of this game really is core to my identity. While there's been plenty of good times though, there's also been plenty of rough times. After the massive release of a 7-minute long trailer showing all of the Versus 13 content, appearing in what looks like a playable state, showing off gameplay, finally giving us a game that we can envision playing, everything went silent. Months would go by and Square would return to its old ways, refusing to comment on anything regarding the project. It was at that time Kotaku would run an article stating that Final Fantasy Versus 13 was cancelled. And Kotaku got absolutely slammed for running this rumor at the time, even with Square Enix commenting that the game hadn't been cancelled. Though according to the report, quote, another source tells Kotaku that a few months back, Final Fantasy 13's development and resources had actually been folded into another game, which is to be the next numeric Final Fantasy title, Final Fantasy 15. Whether this meant the game's assets and code or simply the movement of staff was unclear. This was 2012, and little did we know this would turn out to be absolutely correct. Versus 13 had been cancelled, and what was left would indeed go on to be folded into the next mainline Final Fantasy. And then it happened. E3 2013 comes, and we're shown a pair of trailers for the game beyond our wildest imaginations. And at the end of the trailers, fans would feel the ultimate vindication. Final Fantasy Versus 13 is now Final Fantasy 15. And while this bombastic trailer was so mind-blowing at the time, it would go on to haunt the game for the rest of its life. But it was when expectations were at their highest that the game's original director, Tetsuya Nomura, had stepped down to focus on 2 projects that Square Enix felt only he was capable of: Kingdom Hearts 3, and a game that was currently unannounced, Final Fantasy VII Remake. 2014 onward would see a new project director, Hajime Tabata. He would go on to direct Final Fantasy 15 in an open style, constantly giving us new looks into the game, sometimes at the risk of giving us too much too early, showing off the game in a state that was simply not finished yet, allowing fans to give feedback actively as the game was developed. While it was unusual, it was a necessary and important step to show fans that it was a real game, and it was actually coming out. All these demonstrations and live streams with the directors would lead to one big event, Uncovered Final Fantasy 15. It was there we would learn, in the same vein as the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, Square Enix had planned a Final Fantasy 15 universe, which included a movie, an anime, and other content. At the time, we would finally get a date, September 30th, 2016. All this waiting would finally come to an end, allegedly. That's when rumors began popping up. A legitimate leaker on 4chan ended up leaking the entire game story 6 months in advance, and nearly all the details that he posted for the game would turn out to be true. This whistleblower claimed that the game simply was not finished, and that there was no way that the game could be finished in its current state by September 30th. This was posted in July, and not only was the second half of the game just not finished, he also said that the PlayStation 4 version of the game barely ran for 2 full hours before simply crashing, and the Xbox One build of the game barely even turned on. The game was receiving rewrites every few weeks because in playtest the story was going over horribly with the testers. Then it finally happened. Hajime Tabata got on camera and announced to the world that Final Fantasy 15 had been delayed until November 29th, 2016. But after all this time, what was another few months? Then that fated day came. Final Fantasy 15 released, but for many of us it wasn't the game that we anticipated. It was a game with muddy story details, and people couldn't help but notice how different it was from the original concept of Versus. Square recognized these complaints and attempted to fix the game through several patches and updates, even adding in promised features from years ago, like character switching, leading all the way up to the conclusion with Final Fantasy 15 Episode Arden, and the cancellation of the game's story continuation, Dawn of the Future, which has been reduced to a novel, thus ending this long, almost decade-and-a-half journey. Final Fantasy 15 is finally over, and while I can't say I was fully satisfied with the game, I've also been so thankful for this game. It's a game that's allowed me to meet so many people and get so involved with the Final Fantasy community. Even my first video was about how I wouldn't mind Square Enix doing a Final Fantasy 15 too, especially if it was a prequel about Arden. I've met so many awesome friends. The community has created so many memories for me, and the community has contributed so much to their cosplay and their fan arts, and those memories will be with me for the rest of my life, and I'm so grateful for them. While it is hard for me to step away from a journey that's been going on so long and encompasses such a massive amount of time from my life, it's the only way that new and even greater things can happen. So yes, we all have to step away from Final Fantasy 15, and even though that journey ends, the memories will stay with us. And who knows, maybe one day we will see you again. But until then, goodbye, Final Fantasy 15.
You guys are the best.